Howdy doody, buckaroonies. I don't know about you, but one of the things I dread most when I'm working on sample packs is kick drums. It took me a long time to figure out how to make kick drums that were actually good and not super boring. I think we've all been in the situation where we open up a synthesizer like Serum, we add a sine wave with a pitch envelope and hope for the best, and we get something that just sounds like a plain old 808 kick drum, which is just not that fun. Over the years, I've picked up a lot of different techniques to make kick drums that have some character and interest to them, and I wanted to share with you those ideas here today because this is all pretty simple to do, and in the course of an afternoon, you could easily make a giant bank of kick drums for yourself that are unique to you and your music. Today's video is also brought to you by my friends over at Denise, who have just recently released their new plugin called Subgenerator, which is awesome for making kick drums. I love things that help enhance the low end because that means I can work more on the punchy side and add the low end in later. This is actually a free plugin which is included with the purchase of any other Denise plugin. If you haven't heard of Denise before, definitely go check them out. They make some great stuff, including things like Bad Tape, Perfect Room, and Perfect Plate, which are some of my favorite plugins for sound design and just general music making. So grab your synthesizers, take off your pants, and pull out your envelopes, and let's make some kick drums. Now, before we hop on the bus to kick drum land, there is one important tool I recommend you get, which is a good signal analyzer. This is a free plugin called Signalizer, which is available for all platforms, I'm pretty sure at least. This includes a vector scope, an oscilloscope, and a spectrum analyzer. All of these are going to be very important tools. Some DAWs actually come with these tools already, but an oscilloscope and a spectrum analyzer are two really handy things that are great for kick drum design just to keep an eye on things and make sure you're going in the right direction. So on our first step to kick drum glory here, we do the basic sine wave kick drum, which I'm sure we've all done a million times, so I'm gonna kind of gloss over this here, but just in case you've never done this, this is how this works. We have a sine wave, we tune it down, we tie an envelope, in this case I used envelope C, to the pitch here, and this is modifying this by about 20 semitones or so. This has a decay of 100 milliseconds and a sustain of 0. For the amplitude envelope, or the volume coming out of the synthesizer, it's a very similar story. I have my decay set to around 100 to 200 milliseconds depending on the drum, and then I set the slope to again have a bit of a curve to it. This way things just fall off in a bit more of a natural fashion rather than a very boring linear fashion. This gives you your basic kick drum, which sounds like this. Not all that interesting, but we're gonna get there. The other big thing to know is just adding a little bit of distortion. In this case, I've used a shaper inside of Rapid. Without that, and with it, you can hear it just adds a little bit of crunch to things. In our handy dandy signal analyzer, we should see our spectrum look something like this. We can see we've got a nice low end peak here somewhere below 100 hertz. We don't want to go too low or it's not going to sound that good. I find usually peaking around 70 to 100 hertz is where we want to be with that fundamental low tone. Now, if we flip over to our oscilloscope mode here, we can see we've got a basic drum shape. It's maybe a little bit short, so we could lengthen out the envelope decay here. Let's take another look at that. And now we've got a pretty basic looking sine wave kick drum. Next up is one of my personal favorite secret tricks to making better kick drums, which is using a sidechain ring modulator. This is a free plugin called MRingModulator from Melter Productions. It's part of their free plugin suite. If you don't have that, you can download that below. This is a great tool for making drums because it has this sidechain input feature. Ring modulators on their own are really good for making drum sounds and metallic sounds, but using a sidechain input is particularly useful to take a boring signal and add some spice to it with another signal. In this case, what we're going to do is use the sound of an acoustic hi-hat, and we're going to feed that into the sidechain of the plugin here, and then we're going to combine it using the depth knob here to combine that with our sine wave kick drum. I'm not really going to go into details on how a ring modulator works here, but what you need to know is this. I've got an acoustic hi-hat sound here. I pitch this down slightly, and then we're going to feed that into the ring modulator sidechain. How you do this in your DAW might be different, but in my case, all I did was feed this into the sidechain input and I used this pre-fader, and that is very important for this next step. Once we have this set up, let's just up the depth to 100%. We're going to mute our hi-hat channel, and then we're going to arm it, so we have that armed, and we're going to arm our synthesizer. Now, if we play this, we should hear a little bit of a kick drum and a little bit of a hi-hat, and it's kind of blurred between the two, and it's really quiet. Now, we'll drop the depth down, let's say 50% or so, and we've got a healthy blend of these signals. I'm just going to dial that back to taste, about 25%, and we've got a kick drum with a bit of an acoustic drum texture to it, so it sounds just a little bit more realistic and interesting. At this point, we're kind of cooking along here, but it could use a bit more beef. So I've got Denise sub generator up here, and this is a really handy tool to add a bit of low-end weight to whatever you're working on. What this does is it allows you to pick a frequency or a specific note and then dial in a bit of subharmonic stuff going on. That takes our kick drum from this to this. Maybe not so obvious, but let's mix it in more. Maybe drop the rise. And you can hear, if we drop the high pass filter, we've got this big subby energy. Let's dial back the mix. And now we've got a big, mean kick drum. So let's filter that out just a touch. And it's really that easy to add some nice low-end weight. What I really like about this plugin, though, is the ability to shape the rise and fall. So if we mix this in 100%, and let's drop that filter again, just so this is really obvious. Right now, we've got a really snappy low end, and we could bring this up. So that way we're clearing it out of the way of the transient. We're letting that transient really click and knock through, and then we're bringing in a bit of that sub energy and body. Now the fall, very similar story. We could use that to create a big 808 drum, but we can also use this just to shape the end of the drum sound. So now we'll back off the mix, filter out that a little bit with the high pass. And now if we take a look at our handy dandy signal analyzer, we should see in the spectrum here, we got a bit more of that low end weight. Now at this point, we're done with the basic drum design, so we need to make this thing louder, a lot more punchy, and then just add that sprinkle of fairy dust on top that makes it really cool. First up here, I've got Denise's Punisher. This is a great 5-mode distortion. I've got the punish at 29%. That takes the drum from this to this. Really just adds some heat. We could add a bit of makeup gain, but we'll be adding makeup gain later. So right now, we're just gonna leave it like that. We could go to more of a hard clipping style distortion, make it even more aggressive. But in this case, mode 2 is a bit more gentle, and that's what I want. Now that we've added some heat, I like to add just a little bit more texture and interest using Noize 2. This is one of my favorite plugins for drum sound design because it does something very similar to the MRingModulator trick, just a bit different, and the key difference being this rise and fall control once again. In this case, what I did is use a free sample pack from Music Radar, which you can download with the link down below, and it's just a bunch of different textures and noises. So I've used this to shape a very short little bit of one of these samples and filtered it a bit and mixed it into taste, just to add a bit of rattle and grit to the drum. Similarly, the rise and fall controls are really handy here. We can use this to get it out of the way of the transient, and one of the other unique things is if we set these to 0, you can get a really crispy, gritty effect, but I think something like that sounds just a bit more natural. Once you're happy with the sound, just dial it into taste with the mix, and we're done. Now, the real spicy sauce to kick drums is clipping. This is a free plugin from Ven Audio called FreeClip that comes with a bunch of different distortion modes. If you don't have this plugin, you should really go grab it. What I've done is set my clip ceiling down here. I've got this to minus 7.5 dB or so, and I'm just going to use this gain control to drive things in, and then the output to set the final output level. So let's reset this and start driving the drum. If we watch down here, we can see our drum on the window, and we'll see a bit of red whenever it's clipping. Now let's lift up the output level. And we've got a pretty respectable kick drum. If we hop back over to our tools here, let's take a look through the oscilloscope now. And you can see we've got something that looks a lot more like a standard kick drum rather than one little bloop. If we take a look through our spectrum analyzer, you can see we've got a nice big low peak here. We've got a bit of mid-range detail and some high-end grit, so we've got a pretty good kick drum overall. To finalize the sound, I'll pull up my oscilloscope and a compressor. In this case, I've got PSP FETpressor. I do recommend some kind of FET style compressor because these are very fast and punchy, but any compressor will do as long as it has a really fast attack and release time. If we bypass this plugin, you can see we've got just kind of a standard kick drum here. If we bring it back in, we can really squash this thing down and punch it out a bit. So we can use the attack and release to control the amount of punch and the level of the body. This is a very, very handy tool to shape your drums. Now we can drop the threshold, make it not quite so aggressive, and then adjust our makeup as needed to finalize the sound. And that's really all there is to it. This is a really easy technique to explore and modify. You could play different notes and you'll get different drum sounds. We could go in and modify the MRingModulator sample. Let's go find some drum samples here and just quickly experiment with that, I guess. Let's do a kick drum instead of that hat. Let's try a crash cymbal. We could try a clap or something. Those are actually really good usually. And you get the idea. And there you have it, a handful of techniques to take your sine wave kick drums and turn them into something interesting without a lot of effort. You could easily save this as a kind of template project in your DAW and just sit down and make a bunch of kick drums and build up a huge sample library for yourself. Subgenerator is available now for free with any purchase from Denise Audio. I highly recommend you check them out. They make some really great stuff. Big shout out to Denise for hooking me up with a copy of Subgenerator ahead of time to check it out and play with it. I've really been enjoying this thing, and I think you guys will get a lot of mileage out of it too, especially when it comes to sound design. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys again soon.